Good evening and welcome to the Midnight Inquiry, your guide to cozy dreams and just maybe a bit of learning along the way. Tonight we'll be talking about nanites, what they are, what they're not, and why you're hearing about them so much lately. Before we get settled, please take a moment to like and subscribe so I can reach other sleepless souls like you. And if you could, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. Now, let's begin our journey. Now, before we get carried away imagining tiny silver robots screaming through your veins like microscopic Iron Men, let's get our definition straight. Nanite is, at best, a loose pop-sci term. The more accurate terminology is nanobot or nanomachine, and even those feel a little presumptuous when you consider just how finicky this field actually is. Because here's the thing about nanotech. It's less like a miracle in a syringe and more like 1,000 tiny miracles you can't even see under a standard microscope, all needing to hold hands and behave lest they become the world's most expensive dust. A nanobot, in the most wishful interpretation, is a machine that operates at the nanoscale, meaning it's somewhere between 1 and 100 nanometers wide. For scale, if a nanobot were the size of a peanut, a red blood cell would be the size of a car. If that analogy helps. If it doesn't, then just know this. They're so small that your body in all its cellular glory barely notices them. That's part of the point. They are engineered to work within biology, not alongside it. The dream is that they flow through your bloodstream, slip through tissues, and perform tasks ranging from repairing tissue damage to delivering drugs with laser precision to screaming, "Your cholesterol is out of control," directly into the auditory cortex of your brain. But that's the dream. In reality, what we have so far is a mix of impressive prototypes, biological hacking, and chemistry that started to flirt with machinery. Some nanites are no more mechanical than a cleverly folded protein. Others are more like tiny delivery trucks, made of DNA origami and coated in payloads of medicine. Still others are theoretical entirely, future tense promises written in grant applications and whispered about in TED Talks, where phrases like disruptive potential are used like seasoning to distract from the fact that someone just said, "We will soon be injecting artificial intelligence into your pancreas." And yet, despite the technical ambiguity and the chronic misuse of terminology, nanite persists in the public consciousness as the thing that is going to fix everything. Disease, nanites, aging, nanites. That time you dropped your phone in the toilet and it stopped working? Somehow, nanites. They've become the duct tape of futurism. Invisible, supposedly omnipresent, and completely overestimated in terms of actual availability. So, how did we get here? How did nanite become the buzzword of dreams, the whisper behind medical miracles, the scapegoat for sci-fi catastrophes? Part of it, honestly, is storytelling. In a world increasingly driven by the narrative of disruption, nanites represent the ultimate plot device. They can go anywhere, do anything, solve any problem. They're microscopic wish fulfillment. We want to believe that our suffering, our decay, our inconvenient need for doctors can all be outsourced to machines so small they can't be bothered to explain themselves. And maybe they will. Maybe. But for now, nanites are a loose constellation of research efforts, proof of concept technologies, and carefully engineered molecules pretending to be robots. Some are real, many are theoretical, and all are incredibly complicated. They sit at the intersection of biology, chemistry, and materials science, laughing gently at our attempts to control them like tiny gremlins with PhDs in chaos theory. It's easy to romanticize them, especially at night, especially when the world is quiet and the idea of healing from the inside out feels not only plausible but personal. But tonight, as we drift further into the possibilities, let's remember that nanites are not magic. They are not pixie dust. They are not panaceas. They are tools. Complex, ambitious, powerful tools that may one day help us change what it means to be human. But before they do that, we'll need to understand them, not just as machines, but as symbols of something deeper. Our need to fix, to extend, to control, and maybe, just maybe, to heal. So now that we've cleared up the fog of buzzwords and cleared our proverbial nanotech palette, it's time to move on to the next chapter in this molecular bedtime story. What happens when we send nanites not just into the world, but into the human body? The next segment will take us into the glowing heart of medical possibility. Imagine, if you will, a future where the phrase, "we're going to need to operate," sounds not like a grim sentence uttered under fluorescent lights, but like a benign software update. A future in which the sterile surgical theatre, with its swinging doors and gloved hands and gentle beeping monitors, is replaced with something quieter, subtler, almost invisible. No scalpels, no incisions, just a drink of nanite-laced juice, or maybe a short IV drip, and then you go to sleep knowing 1,000,000 microscopic agents are setting off on a quest worthy of an epic poem. Only their battlefield is your bloodstream and their dragon is that weird shadow in your pancreas that showed up on a recent scan. We're not there yet. Of course we're not. But the tantalizing shimmer of that possibility is what's driving so much excitement and so much funding in the realm of medical nanotechnology. Because the question isn't just what if nanites could help us get better. The question is what if they could change everything about how we define medicine in the first place? Let's begin with the most straightforward application, drug delivery. It might not sound glamorous, but it's a keystone in the temple of modern medicine. Right now, if you're prescribed a medication, your whole body is getting involved whether it needs to or not. A pill for your inflamed knee also takes a scenic tour of your liver, kidneys, heart, and every other innocent bystander along the way. This shotgun approach works, sort of, but it's inefficient and causes side effects that sometimes rival the illness itself. Enter nanites, not as little robotic surgeons just yet, but as guided couriers, specialized vehicles designed to go only where they're needed. The idea is to encapsulate drugs within nanoscale carriers, tiny containers made of lipids, polymers, or even DNA structures that protect the medication, ferry it through the body, and release it at the target site. Like a FedEx truck that knows exactly which cell to knock on and leaves the rest of the neighborhood in peace. We already have rudimentary versions of this. Liposomal drugs and polymeric nanoparticles are being used in chemotherapy, where precision is vital to killing cancer cells without decimating the rest of the immune system. These are the training wheels of nanomedicine. They aren't the elegant, self-replicating machines of sci-fi fame, but they are real, and they're working. But what about diagnostics? Could nanites help us find problems before they become critical? Researchers have proposed systems where nanosensors float through the bloodstream, constantly monitoring chemical levels, looking for biomarkers of disease, and sending wireless alerts when something seems off. Imagine a future checkup that doesn't involve a needle, a blood draw, or an awkward paper gown. Instead, your personal nanite crew sends your smartphone a cheerful notification. Hey, early signs of type 2 diabetes, maybe cut back on the pastries. Love, your bloodstream. It sounds like science fiction, and frankly, it still is. But the foundation is there. We already have nanoscale sensors capable of detecting specific proteins, toxins, and genetic sequences. The real challenge is in deploying them consistently, safely, and in a way that doesn't trigger your immune system to throw a molecular tantrum. Of course, the big dream, the shimmering holy grail of nanomedicine, is repair. True internal surgery. The kind where nanites don't just detect or deliver, but intervene. They weave torn tissue back together, scrape plaque off arterial walls, or excise tumours cell by cell with laser-like precision. The dream is that instead of cutting through layers of muscle and fat and bone, we let an army of mechanical mites slip through the bloodstream, cross barriers no scalpel ever could, and perform procedures so delicate a human hand wouldn't even register the motion. There are, naturally, problems. Tiny, complicated, screaming problems. First, how do you power something that small? A robot the size of a bacterium can't exactly carry a battery pack. Options range from harvesting ambient heat or chemical energy in the body to using external magnetic or ultrasonic fields. All clever, all limited. Then there's the issue of control. How do you steer something that small? How do you keep it on task? What happens if it gets lost or confused? If you've ever seen a Roomba wedge itself under a couch and just spin in place for 2 hours, you know how finicky autonomous machines can be. Now shrink that machine by a factor of 1 billion and put it inside a human brain. And yet, progress creeps forward. Some experimental nanites already respond to specific signals, pH levels, magnetic fields, light. Others are being trained using molecular programming, like tiny logic gates made of DNA strands, capable of executing simple commands. If you find this protein, release this drug. If not, keep searching. It's primitive, but it's a start. Biology, after all, is already full of nanomachines. Enzymes, proteins, ribosomes, all working tirelessly inside your cells, translating, assembling, repairing. Our goal isn't to invent something new, but to replicate nature's brilliance with tools we can design and deploy. And then there's immune compatibility. The body doesn't like invaders, even helpful ones, especially ones made of materials it doesn't recognize. So nanites need to be stealthy, coated in polymers that mask their presence, or designed from biological materials so convincingly native that the immune system shrugs and goes about its day. It's like trying to sneak a robot into a masquerade ball and hoping no one notices it's made of metal and blinking red lights. We're getting better at the disguise, but it's an arms race. The immune system is vigilant. Sometimes it's a little too vigilant. We don't want to win the battle against cancer only to trigger a full-blown autoimmune response because our nanites wore the wrong outfit. Still, the momentum is there. The future is bending in this direction. Not with silver bots in your arteries doing kung fu, but with smarter medicine, targeted therapies, less invasive procedures, tools that don't just react to disease but anticipate it. There's a poetic beauty in it, this idea that healing might come not from cutting, but from building. that instead of slicing into the body, we could one day whisper to it, nudge it, let it heal with help so small it passes unnoticed. Will nanites replace the scalpel? Not tomorrow. Maybe not even in our lifetimes. But the scalpel is no longer unchallenged. Its reign, while storied and surgical, is beginning to share the stage. The new tools don't clang in trays. They don't slice or stitch. They swim. They float. They slip through cells and blood and thought. And if we're very lucky, they might one day make medicine feel less like war and more like gardening. The future, as it turns out, is not always made of chrome and LED lights. Sometimes it's made of goo, or strands of DNA, or clumps of protein that twitch when poked. And the line between what we traditionally call a machine and what we've always considered life is beginning to blur in ways that would make even the most straight-faced bioethicist sit back, squint, and ask, wait, are we playing God or just learning the rules? In the early days of nanotechnology, the vision was, frankly, a bit overconfident. Picture a tiny robot smaller than a red blood cell, but with all the design tropes of a 1990s PlayStation cutscene. Little articulated limbs, a glowing core, maybe a saw blade for the dramatic types. These bots would zip around inside your body like interns in a pharmaceutical startup, unclogging arteries, punching cancer cells in the face, and politely rebooting your pancreas. But reality, as is often the case, turned out to be less Transformers and more, we glued some molecules together and it twitched. Which brings us to one of the most amusing and profound realizations in modern nanotech, that maybe the best nanobots aren't built at all. They're grown, or at the very least assembled from nature's spare parts. Because when you get down to the molecular level, the difference between a programmed machine and a well-placed protein begins to disappear. Take DNA origami, for example. It sounds like a novelty sushi roll, but it's actually a technique for folding strands of DNA into very specific shapes. Not metaphorically, literally, like paper. Researchers can bend and twist DNA into little boxes, cages, hinges, and even functional machines. These shapes aren't just cute, they can do things. Trap viruses, release drugs, respond to light or temperature. They're like the IKEA furniture of the molecular world. Flat-packed genetic material folded into purpose. The instructions are written in base pairs instead of Swedish, but the end result is oddly similar, although with significantly fewer leftover screws. So now we must ask, is a DNA cage that opens when it senses cancer cells a nanobot? Or is it just a molecule doing a neat trick? The truth is, both, or neither. We're entering a conceptual grey area where the definitions themselves start to fail us. A robot, classically, is something mechanical, discrete, programmable. But when your robot is made of proteins, responds to stimuli, and self-assembles from basic chemical instructions, it starts to resemble, well, life. And that's not just a metaphor. Some of the most cutting-edge nanotechnology right now borrows shamelessly from biology, right down to the gooey details. Synthetic vesicles that mimic cells, protein motors that walk, yes, walk, along molecular tracks, lipid bilayers that hold together artificial organelles. We're no longer asking, how do we build a robot small enough to swim through your bloodstream? Instead, we're asking, what if your bloodstream is the factory? Consider molecular motors. In your own cells right now, there are tiny protein complexes like kinesin and dynein that haul cargo around along microscopic highways called microtubules. They look like two-legged creatures hauling giant backpacks and walking in slow motion. If you were the size of a water molecule, we didn't invent them, nature did. But now we're studying them with the hopeful glint of reverse engineering in our eyes, because if evolution stumbled across such useful machinery, maybe we can repurpose it. Or at the very least, copy its homework without getting caught. Some researchers have gone one step further and created what are known as xenobots. These are programmable organisms built from the stem cells of frogs, rearranged into new shapes and given simple instructions. They don't have brains, but they can move, respond to stimuli, and even perform basic tasks, like herding microscopic particles into piles. They're not quite nanobots in the strict sense they're visible to the naked eye, but they exist as a strange preview of what happens when you blend robotics with embryology and toss in a bit of digital simulation. Are they alive? Are they machines? Are they just confused little blobs looking for meaning? The answer might be yes to all three. And then it's the case of smart polymers. These are materials that respond to their environment, changing shape, colour, or chemical structure based on heat, pH, or other triggers. A polymer that expands in acidic environments could, for instance, release medication in the acidic tissues of a tumour, but remain inert in the healthy alkaline areas of the body. Does that count as a behaviour? Is it intelligent design or just clever chemistry? Again, the definitions elude us. We're used to machines having gears, wires, software. But these machines are more like spells. Silent, invisible, waiting for just the right condition to activate. At this point, you may be wondering why we're bothering with all this semantic dancing. Why does it matter whether something is a nanobot or a fancy molecule as long as it works? The answer, as always, is nuance. Because how we define these things affects how we regulate them, how we test them, how we explain them to the public, and how we think about the risks and rewards. When a cancer treatment is described as smart medicine, people smile and nod. When you say, "We injected millions of autonomous robots into your bloodstream," they understandably freak out and start Googling lead-lined hazmat suits. So we split hairs. We call them nanosystems, molecular machines, biohybrid assemblies, anything to avoid saying the word robot, even though what we've built might very well qualify. In a way, this definitional uncertainty is a gift. It forces us to think more deeply about what constitutes intelligence, behaviour, design. We're blurring the lines between the mechanical and the organic, not by accident, but by necessity. Because nature is already full of nanomachines. Our job isn't to compete with them, it's to join them. Imagine a future where your body is part factory, part habitat, where your own cells house fleets of helper machines, some built from scratch, others adapted from your own DNA, that monitor, repair, and upgrade your systems in real time. They won't beep or flash or buzz. They'll whisper in enzymes, trade messages in electrochemical pulses, perform surgeries with molecular tweezers, and they won't ask whether they're robots or not. They'll just work. So, are these nanobots, or just very confused molecules? The question itself might be outdated, because in the microscopic frontier we're exploring, confusion is the new normal, definitions are fluid, and the machines of the future might not look like anything we've ever built. They might look like us. Good morning, passengers, or afternoon, or night, or timeless nether dimension. Honestly, time gets weird in here. Welcome aboard the Nanocruiser 3000, a theoretical vessel roughly the size of a small molecule, give or take a few angstroms. Please keep your limbs, cytoplasm, and loosely bonded hydrogen atoms inside the vehicle at all times. You're about to embark on a breathtaking journey through the human body. A vast, bustling, wet metropolis where the infrastructure is made of cells, the traffic laws are biochemistry, and the citizens are mostly proteins that never get a day off. We begin, fittingly, in the bloodstream. Think of this as the monorail system of the body. If this were a theme park, and tonight it is, the bloodstream would be the high-speed internal transit system that keeps everything running on schedule and just barely avoids crashing into itself. As we zoom through arteries, veins, and capillaries, take a moment to admire the architecture. See those red blood cells? The ones shaped like squashed donuts? Each one is a tireless oxygen delivery drone, ferrying precious O2 from your lungs to every corner of your body. No propellers, no engines, just passive diffusion and membrane-bound hustle. And look over there, white blood cells, the overworked security guards of this molecular Disneyland. They're patrolling the plasma, sniffing for trouble, and occasionally performing full-body tackles on suspicious pathogens. That lumbering one with the impressive pseudopods? That's a macrophage, a literal big eater whose job is to engulf invaders and digest them like popcorn shrimp at an all-you-can-eat immunity buffet. We love her. We support her. She's doing amazing work. As we glide past the heart, the rhythmic percussionist of the body's internal symphony, we'll pause to appreciate the sheer mechanical poetry of it. 4 chambers, perfectly timed contractions, valves that open and close with a slapstick comedic precision that would make a cartoon door proud. Every beat sends a surge of blood, yes, but also a message. Keep going, keep functioning. You're alive, baby. For a nanite hitching a ride, this pulsing fortress is both a fuel pump and a dance floor. Every contraction shakes the world. Every moment is a bass drop. Now, brace yourselves. We're diving into the lungs. Take a deep breath if you still remember how. These spongy organs are like the food courts of the body's amusement park. Everything stops here. Everyone gets what they need. Fresh oxygen is inhaled, diffused into the blood, and shipped out on an express train to the mitochondria. Meanwhile, the carbon dioxide waste from every single cell is offloaded like last season's fashion and exhaled into the indifferent world outside, its logistics at its finest. And yet, for nanites, the lungs are more than just an exchange hub. They're a staging area, a place to recharge, reprogram, maybe take a long introspective stare through the alveolar walls and wonder about the existential implications of breath. Now we head upward, past the esophagus, the world's least glamorous water slide, and into the brain. And here, my friends, is where the real fun begins. Welcome to the command center, the control booth, the ride operator's console. The brain is a soft, wrinkly supercomputer running on glucose and self-doubt. It's not just where thoughts happen, it's where reality is stitched together, pixel by molecular pixel. Billions of neurons fire in orchestrated chaos, producing memory, desire, movement, love, paranoia, and the distinct urge to re-watch that one episode of your favourite show for the 7th time. Now, imagine you're a nanite here. You've just arrived via the blood-brain barrier, a security checkpoint so picky it makes airport customs look like a lemonade stand. Getting in is an accomplishment, but once inside, the possibilities are endless. Want to monitor dopamine levels? Sure. Want to stabilize rogue neurons misfiring from epilepsy or early Parkinson's? Why not? Want to whisper calming affirmations to overactive amygdalae during panic attacks? Who's going to stop you, you microscopic hero? But let's not linger. There's still so much of this wonderland to explore. We descend now into the digestive tract, the carnival of chaos, the tilt-a-whirl of organic chemistry. From the moment food enters your mouth, the body transforms into a full-service laboratory. Enzymes break down starches into sugars, proteins into amino acids, fats into usable energy. Each part of the process is orchestrated like a Rube Goldberg machine. Saliva kicks things off, the stomach acids break down the structure, the pancreas chimes in like a sassy sous chef, and the intestines handle absorption like they're trying to get on the leaderboard for most valuable player. To a nanite, this is both a feast and a battlefield. You can ride the lipids like waves, surf along the folds of villi in the small intestine, maybe take a break in the microbiome where trillions of bacterial life forms live, work, gossip, and maintain your metabolic balance. The gut is a pulsing marketplace of data and digestion, and nanites here might serve as customs officers, checking that no dangerous pathogens hitch a ride, or as helpful elves, delivering targeted drugs directly to ulcerated tissue or nutrient-absorbing cells gone lazy. And what theme park is complete without a horror? Ride, welcome to the immune system. Not because it's terrifying, though it can be, but because it's intense. This is the haunted house, the war room, the panic button all rolled into one. Nanites here don't just observe, they strategize. They could modulate immune response to calm autoimmunity, teach T cells to recognize stealthy cancers, or even play diplomat between gut bacteria and their easily offended human host. In this ride, everyone's suspicious, and every cell must show its credentials. It's thrilling, it's high stakes, it's wet. Everything in here is wet. And now, we coast into quieter territory. The liver, the kidneys, the endocrine glands. These are the maintenance tunnels and hydraulic systems of the park. Not flashy, but absolutely vital. The liver, ever the overachiever, detoxifies poisons, processes nutrients, and produces chemicals like it's auditioning for a reality show about overworked organs. The kidneys, meanwhile, filter your blood with quiet grace, producing urine not just as a waste product, but as a final love letter from your bloodstream sent to the world outside. Nanites in these regions are janitors, accountants, censors, medics. They clean, they record, they fine-tune. There is no glory here, but oh, the necessity. And finally we arrive at the bones and muscles, the support beams and animatronics of this fleshy funhouse. The musculoskeletal system is a marvel of tension and leverage, of proteins contracting and bones anchoring. To a nanite, these structures might seem monolithic, but they are alive with signaling molecules, repair cells, and constant remodeling. The bones even manufacture blood cells. The muscles whisper in calcium ions. Nothing is still, not even in stillness. As our tour ends and the nanocruiser returns to the surface, we reflect on what we've seen. This body, your body, is not just a bag of organs. It's a cathedral of complexity, a laboratory of logic and luck, and inside, nanites could become more than passengers. They could be caretakers, engineers, curators of health and hope. Each organ, each cell, each molecule is an exhibit waiting to be understood, protected, and perhaps improved. So if you've ever wondered whether nanotechnology has a place in the human body, wonder no more. It doesn't just have a place, it has season passes. If you're still with me after our microscopic roller coaster ride through the theme park that is your body first of all, congratulations. You've made it through plasma rivers, protein jungles, and neurological light shows with your sense of wonder intact. And second of all, prepare to go deeper. Because tonight we're not just marvelling at what's already inside you, we're imagining what could be added, what could help. Tonight we're talking about tiny doctors with giant dreams, medical nanites, the kind that whisper not in words but in electrons, the kind that don't wear white coats but might just save your life anyway. Let's start with a vision. Picture this. You wake up one day feeling off. Not hospital level sick, but the kind of vague unease that in most cases would be dismissed as probably stress. Except you've got a subscription plan for your health now, and inside your bloodstream are millions, perhaps billions, of tiny autonomous nanomachines, and they're not guessing, they're monitoring, constantly, silently, in real time. One of them, perhaps shaped like a spindly crab crossed with a logic circuit, pings the others with a subtle electromagnetic burst. Something's wrong, it says. Maybe it's an early inflammation marker, a slightly weird lipid concentration, a signal peptide that smells faintly of misfolded proteins. Whatever it is, it's early, very early, the kind of early that medicine today can only dream of catching. Within seconds, the nanites are coordinating. Some begin reporting back to your smartwatch or health hub. Others gather for a closer inspection, delivering a microscopic dose of imaging contrast or molecular dye to clarify what's happening. There's no surgery, no biopsy, no waiting room. You're at work, or asleep, or watching a movie. And while you're laughing at an actor pretending to forget their keys, the real miracle is happening on the inside. Your nanite entourage just detected the whisper of disease before it had a chance to speak. That's just diagnostics. Let's talk about treatment. Suppose it's cancer, a word that, in our current reality, still carries the weight of war. Radiation, chemotherapy, surgeries. The arsenal we use is powerful, but also messy. It's the equivalent of using a chainsaw to trim a bonsai tree. Effective? Sure. Precise? Not so much. But with nanites, precision becomes the point. Medical nanites could be programmed to recognize tumor-specific markers, proteins, enzyme expressions, or even just the twisted shape of a rogue cell's DNA. Once detected, they could either tag those cells for destruction or do the job themselves. Imagine a swarm of microscopic assassins slipping between capillaries, navigating tissue like a subway map, and landing directly on a tumour site. They could deliver targeted chemotherapy that hits only the cancerous cells, sparing healthy ones, or deploy thermal bursts that boil tumours from the inside without damaging surrounding tissue. They could even drill into cancer cells and dismantle them molecule by molecule, like repo men collecting rogue genetic material. And all of this could happen while you read the news, pet your dog, or argue with a toaster that won't recognise your preferred bagel darkness setting. But nanites aren't just about killing, they're about healing too. Imagine you've had a stroke. In today's world, that's a race against time, a matter of minutes before irreversible damage occurs. But in a nanite-enhanced future, the moment a clot begins to form, thousands of tiny responders might rush to the site, dissolving the blockage, clearing the debris, and releasing neuroprotective agents to shield your brain from harm. Or maybe you have diabetes. Right now you prick your finger or wear a patch. But nanites, they could live inside your bloodstream, constantly monitoring glucose levels and releasing insulin as needed, balancing your sugar like a symphony of tiny endocrinologists who never sleep. They could repair damaged cells too, rebuild cartilage in worn-out knees, patch the endothelial lining of aging blood vessels, replace the myelin sheaths that degrade in multiple sclerosis. Think about that. Healing not as an external intervention, but as a conversation between tiny machines and your biology. A dance, a restoration. Of course, no discussion of medical nanites would be complete without the immune system. One of the most misunderstood, glorious, chaotic systems in the human body. It's our defense force, sure, but it's also a hot mess. Autoimmune disorders happen when it mistakes you for the enemy. Allergies occur when it panics over pollen. And transplants get rejected like bad Tinder dates. Enter nanites. These could act as moderators in the immune courtroom. They could analyze antigens and immune signals in real time, whispering calming messages to T cells when they get trigger happy, or translating the intentions of foreign tissue to help it blend in better. If the immune system is a neighborhood watch group with too much caffeine, nanites are the therapist mediating their next meeting. And then, yes, we must go here, there's aging. Aging isn't just a number, it's the slow accumulation of damage, misfolded proteins, telomere shortening, cellular senescence, mitochondrial dysfunction, all the backstage catastrophes that eventually manifest as wrinkles, memory loss, or the sudden realization that loud music is no longer enjoyable. Medical nanites could become custodians of time. They could patrol for senescent cells and clear them before they start polluting their neighborhood. They could repair mitochondrial DNA, patch up protein misfolds, and maintain cellular function long past what nature intended. They could, in short, turn aging into something optional, or at least negotiable. But let's not get carried away. There are challenges, ethical ones, technical ones, philosophical ones. We'll get to those in future segments. For now, let's sit with this beautiful, ridiculous, inspiring idea that tiny machines, smaller than bacteria, could roam our bodies not as invaders, but as allies. That we might one day live in harmony with technology so seamless, so intimate, that we barely notice it. Not because it's hidden, but because it's integrated. Invisible caretakers inside our very cells, helping us heal, endure, and maybe even flourish. So next time you hear the word nanites, don't picture sci-fi horror stories or shiny grey goo. Picture a tiny doctor with a giant dream, one that fits neatly between two red blood cells, one that doesn't need a diploma to make a difference, one that, given the right code, the right mission, and the right patient, might just save the world, one molecule at a time. If a nanite is a tiny doctor, it still needs lunch, or coffee, or a long extension cord. Because no matter how noble its molecular intentions, even the most selfless microscopic medic requires energy to function. And that's where things get beautifully complicated. Because powering something smaller than a virus isn't just an engineering problem. It's a philosophical conundrum, wearing a lab coat and pacing a nanoscopic hallway. It asks questions like, what is power at this scale? How do we deliver it? And can we do it without accidentally turning someone's bloodstream into a glittery nuclear accident? Let's begin with the obvious. Batteries. You might think of those chunky AA cylinders that live in remote controls and smoke detectors, but at the nanoscale, batteries aren't so much cylinders as they are sorcery. A traditional battery simply doesn't shrink down well. You can't just miniaturize a lithium-ion cell until it's microscopic and call it a day. Not unless you want your nanite to explode like a popcorn kernel in a microwave. So instead, engineers are working on molecular batteries, tiny power systems that might rely on chemical gradients, redox reactions, or piezoelectric materials. These wouldn't just store energy, they generate it dynamically, using the environment around the nanite. Think of it as metabolic freeloading. A nanite doesn't carry its energy like a hiker with a granola bar. It sips from the bloodstream like a very polite vampire, harvesting glucose, lactate, or even electrochemical potential as it floats along. But that's just one theory. Some researchers are exploring the possibility of inductive charging at the cellular level. That's right, wireless charging for tiny robots. Imagine a nanite pulling up beside a capillary wall, then sitting very still as a nearby external device transmits electromagnetic energy through the tissue to a tiny coil inside the nanite, which absorbs it and converts it to usable power. It's essentially the same idea as a wireless phone charger, except your phone doesn't circulate through your liver at 40 centimeters per second. This method could allow for bursts of energy delivery, maybe while the patient sleeps or sits near a specialized field emitter, giving their entire fleet of internal machines a refresh. Other models skip internal power altogether and focus on passive design, nanites that are powered by the environment itself. They might have materials that bend and flex in the presence of thermal gradients or magnetic fields, generating motion or electricity just by existing in a body that's 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Some could even be propelled by enzymes that convert specific molecules, say glucose, into energy, functioning more like bacteria than machines, which, in a poetic twist, is fitting. Because at this scale, the difference between biology and technology begins to blur. Once you start thinking of nanites as more organism than object, you realize the most efficient power sources may already exist inside us. Cells have been solving this problem for billions of years. Mitochondria, those trusty little power plants within our cells, convert glucose and oxygen into ATP, the molecular currency of energy. Some researchers dream of engineering nanites that mimic this process, effectively becoming synthetic organelles, little robots that borrow the metabolic pathways of life itself. These nanobiotic hybrids, as they're sometimes called, wouldn't just be powered by the body, they'd be part of it, integrated with its rhythms, responsive to its chemistry, and maybe, just maybe, able to self-sustain. That raises another deliciously strange question. Can nanites recharge themselves? Could they return to a docking station in the body, say the liver or a specially implanted reservoir, and draw energy like an electric car? Maybe they could gather in the gut and digest specific nutrients, converting them into fuel before heading back out on their next microscopic mission. Or perhaps they'll communicate with each other like a swarm of bees, coordinating rest cycles and energy intake in shifts, so there's always a fresh crew buzzing about while others recharge. This would require not just power, but intelligence, or at least a distributed system that mimics intelligence well enough to avoid traffic jams in the aorta. Of course, No discussion of nanite power is complete without acknowledging the lurking sci-fi spectre of runaway replication, the dreaded grey goo scenario. This is the hypothetical disaster in which nanites, desperate for energy, begin to consume everything in sight: your sugars, your cells, your couch, your cat, until all of Earth is reduced to a puddle of self-replicating sludge. It's a fun bedtime story for those of us who enjoy existential dread, but the reality is more nuanced. We're unlikely to give nanites unchecked replication powers. They'd be designed to shut down after a certain time, dissolve in the absence of key enzymes, or be deactivated externally through light or magnetism. The point is, while grey goo makes for good headlines, actual scientists are more interested in making sure their microscopic robots don't go full Skynet. Still, the mere possibility of autonomous energy harvesting raises ethical dilemmas. If nanites can draw power from the body, is there a risk they'll draw too much? Could a poorly programmed fleet of bots siphon off so much glucose that the host starts feeling faint or enters hypoglycemic shock? Could they deprive a specific organ of resources? Or, in a slightly funnier version of the same fear, could they make you feel perpetually hungry, turning the patient into a walking buffet for their own microscopic passengers? These are not idle hypotheticals. They're part of a growing discussion in biomedical engineering: how to balance performance with safety when designing machines that live in harmony with biology, rather than dominating or draining it. And then there's the issue of storage. Nanites can't exactly carry around battery packs like your phone does, unless you're imagining a fantastically tiny lithium cell nestled somewhere between the nanite's carbon struts, like a microscopic backpack. Even if such a thing could be engineered, it would drastically limit the nanite's function and lifespan. You'd be left with robots that sputter out after minutes, maybe seconds, unless they can top up on the woe. That's why most promising ideas center around ambient energy, drawing from the very environment the nanite inhabits. Thermal gradients, electrical fields, even sound vibrations, believe it or not, are being explored as potential power sources. The hum of your blood flow, the faint electrochemical whispers between neurons, these could all be part of a nanite's energy diet. Some researchers are even playing with the idea of biofuel nanites, essentially giving them the ability to ingest chemical compounds like glucose or lactic acid and process them using catalytic surfaces. Think of them like artificial stomachs with tiny gears, able to metabolize the way life does, but built with precision-cut atoms instead of squishy organelles. These nanites wouldn't just be passive passengers, they'd be participants in the body's ongoing biochemical ballet, dipping in and out of metabolic exchanges with the finesse of a chemical tango dancer. But of course, this raises yet another concern. If nanites are too autonomous, too clever in how they gather and use power, do they cross a line from tool to organism? Where do we draw the distinction? A machine that fuels itself, that adapts to scarcity, that coordinates with its peers and changes behavior based on available resources. Well, it starts to sound less like a gadget and more like a life form. And once we enter that murky zone, we have to ask new kinds of questions. What are our responsibilities to these machines? What rights, if any, might they eventually warrant? Could the humble power source be the start of a new evolutionary fork? The debate isn't just academic. If nanites are going to be a long-term solution for anything, repairing organs, fighting cancer, cleaning up environmental toxins, they need to be reliable, stable, and most importantly, non-draining. Nobody wants to fix their liver at the cost of their pancreas. So for now, scientists are walking a tightrope, trying to design nanites that are self-sufficient enough to be useful, but not so independent that they become burdensome, or worse, unpredictable. In that balancing act lies the future of molecular medicine and the next great revolution in how we interact with the very structure of life. When people talk about the future of nanotechnology, especially the glimmering dream of medical nanites, they usually paint a picture so pristine it belongs in a brochure titled "Tomorrow's Health Today." We envision silver slivers of machinery coursing gently through the bloodstream, diagnosing illnesses with polite beeps and dispatching rogue cancer cells like microscopic bouncers in a nightclub for misbehaving mitochondria. It's all clean, efficient, and gloriously utopian. But let's take a moment to consider the far less sexy question nobody wants to print on the front of a glossy pamphlet. What happens when they screw up? Malfunctions happen, always have, always will. Every system, no matter how elegantly designed, eventually has a bad day. Your computer blue screens, your smart fridge forgets what cold means. Even your own cells, which have had millions of years to practice, occasionally misread instructions and become tumours. So we should expect, with a sober sigh and maybe a little helmet, that our nanites, no matter how sophisticated, will eventually hiccup, burp, or outright rebel. But here's where it gets trickier than usual, because when your nanite malfunctions, it's not sitting politely on a desk waiting for you to turn it off and on again. It's inside you. It's up in your blood, between your neurons, hanging out in your liver like it owns the place. You don't get to hit Control-Alt-Delete on a robot the size of a virus while it's tangled in your pulmonary capillaries. Which begs the terrifying question, what kind of malfunctions are even possible, and what would they feel like? Let's start small, figuratively speaking of course, because everything here is already small in the literal sense. Imagine a nanite that's been programmed to detect inflammatory markers and deploy a tiny dose of anti-inflammatory agent when it spots trouble. Great idea, right? Now imagine it breaks. Not in a flashy, obvious way, just a subtle bug in the code. Instead of deploying its medication once, it never stops. You stub your toe, and suddenly a billion microscopic Florence Nightingales flood your system with more meds than a Walgreens clearance bin. At best, your immune system goes to sleep on the job. At worst, your body turns into a crash test dummy for autoimmune confusion. You become, in essence, too healthy to function. Or perhaps your nanites develop an identity crisis. These were supposed to work in harmony, communicating wirelessly, sharing data like colleagues in a well-run office. But what if one gets its wires crossed and thinks your healthy cells are the problem? It doesn't take many rogue agents to cause trouble when they're mass-produced and built for microscopic sabotage. A malfunctioning group of nanites could, hypothetically, interpret your kidney as a malignant growth and start dismantling it with surgical precision. Like a team of confused IKEA assemblers unscrewing your organs in alphabetical order. And then there's the classic software update gone wrong. Ah yes, the dreaded over-the-air patch. It happens to your phone. 1 minute you're scrolling peacefully, the next you're screaming at an error code while your apps blink in Morse code. Now imagine that happening to your bloodstream. a company rolls out a new firmware patch to fix a minor bug in diagnostic calibration, except instead, the nanites forget their job entirely and start trying to repair your red blood cells by aggressively reconfiguring them into whatever they think better looks like. Suddenly, your body is full of puzzle pieces that no longer fit. Of course, the human body is resilient. We survive viruses, parasites, gluten. Surely we could bounce back from a misbehaving army of invisible robots. Possibly. But the problem isn't just the physical damage. It's the sheer unknowability of what's going wrong. With bacteria or a tumour, we can biopsy. With autoimmune diseases, we can use decades of immunology to guide treatment. But with nanite malfunctions, especially those governed by AI-level decision-making, we're entering uncharted territory. How do you debug a swarm that doesn't leave logs? How do you reverse engineer a microscopic breakdown when your tools are too large to even see the mess? And here's another sobering twist. Many proposed nanites will be autonomous. They won't require real-time human input. That's the whole point, to create self-sustaining agents that can detect, decide, and act faster than we ever could. But autonomy is a double-edged scalpel. When something goes wrong, there's no panic button. There's no tech support hotline that a nanite can call. There's only its own programming, and if that fails, all bets are off. A million tiny decision makers acting on flawed instructions is not a comforting thought. It's the biological equivalent of a hedge fund collapse, but inside your spleen. Now let's talk about redundancy. Surely we design these systems with fail-safes, right? Like a shutdown command or a kill switch, and sure, that's part of the plan. But even the most brilliant safety systems have loopholes. What if the shutdown signal can't get through because of interference? What if your body's chemistry changes in such a way that the nanites no longer interpret the signal correctly? What if one nanite mutates? Yes, mutates, and teaches the others how to ignore the signal altogether? It sounds like science fiction, until you remember that these things are literally machines operating in an evolutionary environment. The potential for drift, adaptation, or plain old statistical chaos isn't zero. And let's not forget that once nanites are introduced into a person's system, the line between biology and technology begins to blur. What if some of those systems start interacting in ways we didn't predict? What if nanites trigger gene expression? What if they influence hormone levels? What if they form colonies, little micro-societies, clusters of logic and silicon where they begin to prefer certain actions over others? It might not be Skynet, but it could still be the beginning of a post-human hybrid physiology. And you didn't even check the box that said opt into beta features. Now, before we all start sleeping in Faraday cages and covering ourselves in lead paint, let's be fair, none of this is guaranteed. Most researchers are acutely aware of the risks, and the first generations of medical nanites will likely be strictly limited, incredibly simplistic, and designed to dissolve after use. We're not unleashing cybernetic jellyfish into the population, not yet anyway. But these hypotheticals matter, because if we build a world where machines can swim through our veins, we'd better be ready for the day when they swim sideways. So, what happens when they malfunction? Hopefully nothing catastrophic. But hope is not a system check, and as history has taught us repeatedly, it's only when systems fail that we learn what they were actually doing all along. Perhaps the nanites of the future will be perfect, But if they're not, we'd better have plans, not just for fixing the errors, but for understanding the machines we built to live inside us and what they might become when we stop watching. Good evening again, sleepy traveller. If you've made it this far, you've journeyed with me through the bloodstream, through malfunctioning microscopic mischief makers, through all the grand promises and pitfalls of a nanoscopic future. But tonight, or perhaps I should say, in this special corner of the same night, we're entering perhaps the most delicate territory of all, the brain. That intricate lattice of jelly and electricity where our memories are stored, our dreams are spun, and our sense of self balances like a wobbly spinning top. And now we ask the question, what happens when we invite nanites into that space, into our very consciousness? At first glance, it sounds miraculous. Imagine fleets of nanites dancing through the synaptic corridors of your brain, repairing damaged neurons, enhancing signal clarity, perhaps even augmenting cognitive capacity. People with Alzheimer's could reclaim names and faces. Those with Parkinson's might find their tremors soothed not by pills, but by tiny agents smoothing the chaos within motor circuits. Mental illnesses, from depression to schizophrenia, might be rebalanced at the chemical level by programmable custodians. Tuned to our exact neurological patterns, it's a compelling vision, as intimate as it is astonishing. But let's pull back and consider what exactly we're talking about when we suggest enhancing or repairing the brain. We're not adjusting a thermostat here. The brain is not a server farm or a spreadsheet. It is, for lack of a better word, you. Your fears, your memories, the time your third-grade crush told you your shoelaces were untied. This is the theatre of your life, where identity is performed and experienced. So when we start allowing machines we may not even fully understand, to operate there, we're not just tampering with flesh. We are rewriting the ink in the book of the self. Let's talk about the wiring first. Your brain is a dense jungle of neurons, approximately 86 billion of them, connected by trillions of synapses. Each neuron is its own drama queen, firing or staying silent based on chemical whispers and electrical suggestion. Now imagine nanites that can track these firings, enhance them, suppress them, or even create entirely new pathways. You could, in theory, implant knowledge, download a language, a dance move, or the entire collected works of Tolstoy into your long-term memory, like uploading a PDF. You could overwrite phobias, nudge emotional regulation, or tweak attention like a DJ adjusting the treble. But again, here's the kicker. Who decides what counts as an improvement? What is optimized cognition anyway? Is it faster recall, sharper logic, more emotional nuance, less? The danger here isn't just malfunction. It's the intentionality behind what we program these nanites to do. Imagine a future in which employers pay to boost productivity through neural enhancements, or governments decide that certain emotional responses are inefficient. Nanites could become the means by which conformity is engineered at the level of thought. You wouldn't need censorship if you could make dissent neurologically unpleasant. And let's not forget the possibility, whispered at the fringes of futurism, of shared consciousness. If nanites can interface not just with neurons but with external networks, what's to stop two or more people from linking minds, even temporarily? This might sound beautiful. Soulmates communicating without words, musicians collaborating mind to mind, therapists joining patients in their internal landscapes. But it also opens the door to surveillance not just of behaviour, but of thoughts. A world where privacy ends not at your front door but at the edge of your amygdala. Of course, we could build in safeguards, limitations, ethical frameworks, but we should be honest with ourselves. Technology has a way of outpacing ethics, and even the most well-intentioned systems can be hacked, corrupted, or misused. A hacker infiltrating a traditional computer system can steal your data. A hacker infiltrating your neural network via nanite interface could alter your memories, insert suggestions, or sow confusion in ways you wouldn't even be able to distinguish from your own thoughts. Imagine gaslighting becoming not just emotional manipulation, but a literal rewrite of your internal narrative. Imagine waking up not with a groggy stumble to the bathroom, but with your nanites gently adjusting your serotonin levels, helping you ease into alertness with the hormonal grace of a sunrise. No coffee jitters, no rude alarms, just biochemical nudges. As you brush your teeth, nanites might be identifying the early markers of a cavity and dispatching a few specialized units to shore up the enamel. You wouldn't notice them. They wouldn't beep or vibrate or ping. They'd just do their job silently, invisibly, intimately. As you head to work, maybe your nanites are optimizing your oxygen absorption, improving your focus, modulating your energy output based on your calendar. Big meeting at 11? Time for a mild endorphin boost. Long drive home later. Better start filtering out early fatigue signals. You're not being hacked or controlled. You're just fine-tuned, like a violin, freshly rosined and ready for its part in the symphony of the day. And when you get sick, you wouldn't rush to the pharmacy or beg your doctor for an appointment. Your nanites would already be on it, sensing changes in cellular behavior, detecting pathogens, releasing targeted compounds directly at the site of infection. Maybe they'd even ping your doctor with a quiet note. The doctor reviews, adjust the nanite parameters remotely, and by the time you feel the first sneeze, the battle is already being won. This vision isn't just science fiction. It's the natural endpoint of a trend already in motion. The steady miniaturization of technology, the integration of systems into biology, the collapse of the boundary between the organic and the mechanical. Nanites could become as standard as Wi-Fi, as invisible as Bluetooth, as expected as a phone buzzing in your pocket. Not because of a single revolution, but because of 1,000 small, convenient, seductive steps. But ubiquity brings complications, because with every amazing new technology that becomes ordinary, we also inherit a new kind of vulnerability. With smartphones, it was distraction, addiction, surveillance. With nanites, well, things get personal. These aren't just tools you hold, they're agents inside your body. What happens when an update goes wrong? When a patch introduces a bug not in your software, but in your immune response? What happens when your nanites get hacked, not to steal your passwords, but to alter your hormone levels, or subtly nudge your mood, or dull your ability to feel fear during a political protest? It sounds dramatic, but only because it's new. We once worried that GPS could be used to stalk people. Now we casually ping our friends' locations without a second thought. Our culture has a way of normalizing the once unthinkable, as long as it comes with enough convenience. That's the true genius and danger of everyday technology. It doesn't demand control. It seduces you into handing it over. Now, imagine the App Store of the body. Developers pitching nanite programs like plugins for your physiology. Boost productivity. Lose weight effortlessly. Experience calm during turbulence. Subscriptions to your nervous system. microtransactions for mood, trial versions of anti-anxiety packages, with the premium version offering improved interpersonal charm. It sounds absurd until it doesn't, because someone somewhere will offer it, and someone else, exhausted, lonely, curious, or simply bored, will say yes. So will nanites become as common as smartphones? Maybe not tomorrow, but soon enough that we should be thinking about it now. We should be deciding what we want our relationship with this technology to look like. Do we want it to be invisible but benevolent, transparent but limited, personalized but accountable? The answers aren't just technical, they're cultural, philosophical, ethical. Because this isn't just about machines, it's about us, our boundaries, our agency, our willingness to blur the line between what is human and what is tool. There's something poetic in the idea of machines so small they could hide in a raindrop, and yet so powerful they might shape our entire species. That the most transformative technology of the 21st century might not be something we can see, but something we feel, or perhaps something we forget about entirely until it's part of us, as natural and invisible as the breath we take without thinking. The future of nanites isn't just one of technical achievement, it's one of emotional adaptation, of rethinking what it means to be human when the machines don't serve us from the outside, but live with us, in us, as part of our inner world. One day, not too far off, someone might look at their grandparents and ask incredulously, "You didn't have nanites at all. How did you live?" And the grandparent, now quite possibly you, might smile and say, "We managed, but not nearly as well." There's something reverent about the nervous system, isn't there? The brain, the spinal cord, the infinite web of nerves threading through our bodies like ethereal tree roots. It's not just the circuitry of our bodies, it's the command center of our entire existence. Every thought, every sensation, every decision from scratching your nose to falling in love originates from this gelatinous electric spiderweb tucked behind our eyes. So when we begin to whisper about nanites potentially navigating this neural labyrinth, the tone naturally shifts from curiosity to reverence, maybe even trepidation. Because in this context, nanites aren't just tools, they are would-be pilgrims venturing into the holy land of consciousness. The prospect of introducing microscopic machines into our nervous system sounds, on the surface, like the kind of story that ends in robots staging a coup from inside your cerebellum. But the aim is not domination, it's precision repair, real-time diagnostics, and perhaps most fantastically, a sort of symbiosis between mind and machine that could augment or even restore cognitive function. The brain is not just a clump of neurons, it's a living history of trauma, memory, pattern recognition, and unpredictable creativity. And nanites, should they ever be permitted to work here, would need to operate like the most sensitive of neurosurgeons crossed with therapists who know when to shut up and just quietly fix things without dredging up your unresolved dreams about high school math tests. Let's start with the spinal cord. A severed spine has long been the biomedical equivalent of a slammed door. Once it's broken, the nerves can't transmit signals, and the resulting paralysis is permanent. But what if nanites could bridge that gap? Picture trillions of nanites assembling a makeshift scaffolding of conductive polymers and molecular adhesives, restoring the lost electrical highway one nerve at a time. Not just a band-aid, but a reweaving of the signal tapestry, allowing movement and sensation to return where there was once only stillness. And unlike bulky external devices, these nanites would move silently, invisibly, delicately mending the very wiring of the body like spectral electricians. And then, of course, we come to the brain. This is where science tiptoes into something bordering on metaphysics. If nanites could enter the brain and repair neural damage, clearing amyloid plaques associated with Alzheimer's, for instance, or reinforcing weakened synapses in degenerative conditions like Parkinson's, we could be looking at the closest thing to cognitive resurrection humanity has ever achieved. But the risks are immense. One misstep, one unintended interference with the balance of neurotransmitters, and you're not fixing a brain. You're altering a personality, memory, mood, identity. These aren't static data points to be restored like files on a hard drive. They're deeply fluid, often contradictory tapestries held together by context, emotion, and mystery. Tampering with the brain isn't just science, it's storytelling, with the stakes being the protagonist's very selfhood. But let's entertain the more benevolent possibilities. Imagine nanites that can not only detect the early biochemical signs of depression or anxiety, but gently correct them before they spiral into full episodes, not by drugging the brain into docility, but by subtly rebalancing neural signaling, amplifying resilience from within. A kind of emotional chiropractic session performed at the atomic level with no appointment necessary. Or imagine nanites helping stroke victims regain speech and mobility by restoring blood flow and clearing clots before they have time to do lasting damage. These aren't miracles, they're mechanisms, albeit ones we don't yet possess. Perhaps most tantalizing of all is the notion of neuroplasticity on steroids. Our brains are already capable of astonishing adaptation, learning languages, instruments, TikTok dances. But what if nanites could accelerate that process? What if recovery from brain injury became not just possible, but routine? What if, after trauma, the brain could rewire itself not over months or years, but days, with nanites guiding each dendrite to its new home like a tiny glowing Google Maps for neurons? Of course, we can't talk about the nervous system without acknowledging how little we still understand it. For every elegant circuit we decode, 10 more mysteries emerge. Consciousness remains elusive, emotion even more so. So while nanites might one day act as caretakers within the nervous system, they'll need to do so with a kind of algorithmic humility. No amount of code can replace intuition, and no diagnostic scan can fully measure grief, joy, or longing. Perhaps the greatest challenge for nanites in the nervous system is not engineering but empathy, the recognition that the mind they serve is not a machine to be repaired, but a story to be gently continued. And if we ever do reach this point, where nanites move through our minds like careful librarians tending to worn pages, we'll have entered a new era, not just of medicine, but of meaning. One in which our bodies are no longer prisons of decay but collaborative works in progress. One in which our thoughts are no longer isolated phenomena but protected, nurtured, and perhaps even enhanced by technologies small enough to be called miraculous. Let's take a moment to appreciate just how rude our immune system is. Not in the "it forgot your birthday" kind of rude, but in the "it sometimes decides your own organs are the enemy and stages a full-scale biochemical mutiny" kind of way. Autoimmune diseases like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, type 1 diabetes, These are your body's security guards tackling the CEO because they heard a weird cough. It's a marvel of evolution, yes, but also a testament to the fact that evolution isn't a designer. It's more like a janitor duct taping problems until the building doesn't immediately collapse. Enter nanites. Tiny, molecular-scale machines capable of performing highly targeted interventions with algorithmic precision and zero emotional baggage. They don't panic. They don't guess. They don't release histamines like confetti at a microscopic birthday party every time they see a peanut or a pollen grain. Instead, they follow instructions. They monitor. They adapt. And one day they might entirely replace your immune system, not in a coup, but in a mutual agreement, a diplomatic handover, the sort of thing you'd expect to happen in a utopian science fiction democracy between species. But let's rewind a little. What does replacing an immune system even mean? It starts with surveillance. Right now, your immune system is more or less a glorified pattern recognition program written in meat. It recognizes molecular shapes, epitopes, and compares them to a hard-coded database of self versus not self. That database, tragically, isn't updated after you're born. It's like having a firewall that never downloads new virus definitions. Sure, it works great for the flu you caught in 8th grade, but introduce something novel, say a new strain of coronavirus, and suddenly your body's in DEFCON 1, but also inexplicably trying to shut down your lungs just in case. Nanites, on the other hand, could learn. Actively. Continuously. Imagine molecular-scale bots equipped with AI models trained on billions of protein sequences, capable of pattern-matching foreign invaders with the nuance of a linguist analysing dialects. These aren't just bouncers at the club of your bloodstream. They're forensic investigators, threat analysts and negotiators. If a virus enters your system, nanites don't just kill it. They study it, archive it, and share that information with other nanites. Your internal defense network becomes a living Wikipedia of pathogens, and it doesn't stop there. Right now, when you get sick, your immune system causes collateral damage. It inflames tissues, breaks down cells, even causes fevers and fatigue in its frenzied effort to eliminate threats. It's a scorched earth strategy. A panicked monkey with a flamethrower. But nanites could be surgical. They could target infected cells with laser precision, literally in some cases, as photothermal nanoparticles are being developed to heat and destroy specific cell types under near-infrared light. Nanites could kill bacteria by rupturing their membranes, not by flooding your entire system with antibiotics that also massacre your gut flora like a medieval village in a Viking raid. You wouldn't get sick in the way we understand it anymore. You might not even feel infections. You'd have internal status messages like, alert, minor rhinovirus strain neutralized, no user action required. Maybe your phone buzzes with an app notification. Your nanites prevented a cold today. That's your 47th infection this year. You're on a roll. And just like that, illness becomes an archived concept. Something quaint, like VHS tapes or 2006-era Facebook statuses. But of course, this new immune system could do more than defend. It could repair. Here's where things get delightfully sci-fi and unsettlingly godlike. Nanites could patrol the body constantly, not just for pathogens but for anomalies. Cancerous cells, for instance, often fly under the radar of the traditional immune system. They mutate just enough to slip past defences, but not enough to stop dividing. With machine precision nanites, however, Every cell is subject to real-time quality control. A cell's protein expression deviates, flagged. Its metabolic profile shifts, isolated. The nanite immune system doesn't need to wait until a tumour has formed. It detects and destroys the rogue cell at stage 0. Cancer, as a concept, dies not with a bang, but with 100 million microscopic whirs of synthetic judgment. And let's go one step deeper. Say you suffer an injury. Right now, your body deploys platelets, macrophages, and cytokines in a chaotic biochemical traffic jam that results in a big gooey scab and weeks of soreness. But nanites could deploy smart scaffolds, repair crews that rebuild tissue in hours rather than days. You twist an ankle, and nanites reinforce the ligament with artificial proteins while dissolving inflammation-causing enzymes. You break a bone, and within minutes, a lattice of carbon nanostructures forms a temporary cast inside the fracture, while osteoblasts are guided cell by cell to rebuild the original bone matrix with eerie perfection. This isn't recovery, this is restoration. Over time, we'd come to see our original immune system as a kind of draft version, a beta test, something admirable for its time, but ultimately a prelude to something better, like switching from dial-up internet to fibre optics, or from yelling at your printer to apologising to your printer's sentient replacement. The nanite immune system wouldn't be entirely biological, nor entirely mechanical. It would be something new, a cyberbiotic feedback loop, a dynamic cohabitation of engineered intent and living tissue. And in many ways, it might be the first glimpse of what post-human biology could look like. Not the eradication of humanity, but its augmentation. Humans 2.0 with immune systems that are programmed, updatable, and finally, gloriously drama-free. But, and here comes the part where things get spicy, what happens when your immune system can be hacked? Because of course, the moment you install firmware in your bloodstream, you introduce the possibility that someone somewhere will try to jailbreak your pancreas or DDoS your lymph nodes. What happens if your nanites are connected to a cloud database for global disease tracking and suddenly there's a cyber attack? What if the command, eliminate all cells expressing protein X, is issued globally by mistake? What if protein X is you? The question of control becomes paramount. Who oversees the updates? Can you reprogram your own nanites? Do you own them? Or do they own you? And let's not pretend governments and corporations wouldn't be licking their chops at the idea of an immune system with an off switch. Non-compliance detected. Immunity privileges suspended. Of course, this leads to the inevitable rise of nanite firewalls, biometric cryptography, open-source immune systems maintained by eccentric biohackers in cargo shorts. You'll subscribe to monthly nanite update plans, and entire subcultures will emerge around customized immune responses. Oh, you're still running Gen 6. Cute. My nanites synthesize their own antibodies on the fly, based on synthetic protein folding predictions. You'll meet people who've turned their nanites into aesthetic statement pieces, glowing tattoos that double as biosensors. Teenagers will purposefully infect themselves with mild pathogens just to see how their nanites respond, like biological Pokemon battles. The dark web will trade in illegal nanite mods. Someone will inevitably try to turn them into mood enhancers or recreational experiences. Bro, I overclocked my monocytes. I can feel everything. We will begin to see the immune system not as a fixed, faceless thing tucked away in the depths of our anatomy, but as a fully personalized interface, a piece of us, yet not of us, a companion, a protector, a programmable extension of self. The poet in me wants to say we'll have formed a truce with nature, that instead of fighting viruses and cancers with brute force warfare, we'll have learned to whisper into the cellular microcosm and orchestrate peace. The cynic in me knows we'll find a way to turn even this into a monthly subscription with in-app purchases. But the dreamer sees a world where we no longer fear infection, where hospitals are for reconstruction, not rescue, where a sniffle is a curiosity, not a threat, where dying of the flu becomes an absurd relic, like getting trampled by a horse or succumbing to scurvy on a pineapple-less voyage. And at the centre of that world, humming quietly beneath the skin, are nanites, tiny, tireless, incorruptible, cells of the future. Let's start with a question so audacious, so drenched in millennia of hubris, so deliciously offensive to nature itself that even uttering it aloud seems like tempting the wrath of entropy. Can we reverse aging? No, not moisturize it, not age gracefully, not eat blueberries and do yoga until death politely taps us on the shoulder and offers a senior's discount on the afterlife. I mean reverse it, cell by cell, atom by atom, like rewinding a VHS tape of our molecular collapse and pausing somewhere around 25, right when we peaked in both collagen and poor decision-making. And if we're going to do that, really do it, not with snake oil or optimism, but with tools and code and cold, glittering precision. Then the tools we're talking about are nanites, not metaphorical nanites, not supplement stacks or biohacking. I mean actual machines, tiny programmable robots engineered on the scale of blood cells that do not tire, do not guess, and do not forget what they came for. These are the surgeons that work at a resolution your microscope would weep to glimpse, the clockmakers of the flesh, the janitors of decay. South. How would nanites reverse aging at the cellular level? Let's start with one of aging's most iconic mascots, telomeres. These are the protective caps on the ends of your chromosomes, like the plastic tips on shoelaces. Every time a cell divides, a little bit of that cap wears down. Eventually it gets too short and the cell throws in the towel and either stops dividing, senescence, or dies, apoptosis, which is a bit dramatic but understandable. Without these caps, our chromosomes would fray like bad spaghetti. Now, some cells cheat. Stem cells, germ cells, and yes, cancer cells all have an enzyme called telomerase, which rebuilds telomeres like a DNA fairy godmother. Unfortunately, if we just crank up telomerase across the board, we get cancer. Lots and lots of cancer. So instead of handing every cell an unlimited mitosis punch card, nanites could take a more delicate approach. Imagine nanites patrolling your chromosomes, scanning the telomere length with laser precision. They don't just rebuild indiscriminately, they assess. This is a skin cell in a high turnover area. Its telomeres are too short for its age. Let's rebuild, but only by 5%, no more. Think of it like precision pruning rather than giving every rosebush steroids. And now we come to mitochondria, the original freeloaders. These little organelles were once free-living bacteria that barged into our ancestral cells and then somehow negotiated permanent residency and a company car. They produce energy for the cell, but they're also sloppy. Over time, their DNA mutates. They spit out free radicals. They slowly become less efficient, more chaotic, like your uncle who still owns a fax machine. Nanites could enter mitochondria, or better yet, dismantle and rebuild them one by one. They could scrub mitochondrial DNA, correct mutations, optimize ATP production, and even install synthetic upgrades. Nanostructures that improve heat dissipation, reduce oxidative stress, or communicate more clearly with the nucleus. You'd no longer be powered by glitchy biological gas generators, but by tuned-up molecular engines with better fuel efficiency than a Tesla. And while we're on the topic of DNA damage, oh boy, there's a lot of it. Every single day, every single cell in your body gets hit with something like tens of thousands of molecular insults. Breaks, deletions, substitutions, crosslinks. Your cells have repair systems, but they're overwhelmed. They start letting things slide. Hey, it's just a G where a T should be. Who's going to notice? Spoiler alert, your body notices. Especially after a few decades of creative editing. Now picture nanites deployed like a microscopic proofreading brigade. Not only do they spot mutations, they compare them to a digital master copy of your genome, stored locally or in some heavily encrypted personal database. This gene was corrupted during UV exposure last summer, restoring original sequence. Please wear more sunscreen. Bit by bit, your genetic code is corrected, not just preserved but restored, not just damage control but rollback. Let's take a breath here. Because we've talked about telomeres, mitochondria, and DNA, but aging isn't a single-threaded process. It's a million interlocking failures, a patchwork of biochemical slippage, a game of Jenga where every piece you touch creaks like an arthritic joint. So nanites will have to address protein folding, cross-linking of tissues, epigenetic drift, and the dreaded build-up of senescent cells, zombie cells that don't divide, don't die, but just sit there farting out inflammatory signals like molecular squatters. And yes, there are already ideas for that. Nanites with lysosome-like chambers to digest and clear senescent debris. Nanites that monitor histone markers and reprogram epigenetic expression. Nanites that uncrosslink long-lived proteins in your extracellular matrix, restoring flexibility to arteries, lungs, and skin. Nanites that, brace yourself, rebuild the thymus, restoring your immune system to teenage levels of adaptability. Imagine being 90 and recovering from a cold in 3 days because your immune cells still know how to party. And yet, the goal here isn't to become immortal mutants, it's to restore function, to roll back the accumulated corrosion, to give cells the ability to be what they once were, crisp, efficient, obedient. It's not about becoming superhuman, it's about becoming human again. But let's not pretend this would be simple. You'd need billions of nanites operating simultaneously. You'd need constant monitoring, redundancy systems, repair drones for the repair drones. You'd need to coordinate across tissues, organs, systems. You'd need regulatory frameworks, ethical oversight, the scientific equivalent of a UN peacekeeping force just to ensure your liver doesn't get overzealous and start replicating like a photocopier at a drunk office party. And then there's the philosophical horror. What if your body is young again, but your mind remains tired? What if you stop aging but can't stop grieving? What if immortality simply becomes the act of watching everyone else grow old while you stay behind, perfect and alone? But we'll get to that in segment 24. That's where we let the melancholy in. For now, here's what we know. Yes, technically, maybe, eventually. Yes, nanites could one day reverse aging at the cellular level. Yes, they could maintain our bodies at peak function indefinitely. Yes, they could undo the damage that biology once considered irreversible. But whether that will make us immortal or just unchanged is a question for another time. For now, let the record show. The war on aging has a new front, and its soldiers are so small they don't even know they're fighting. Let's face it, cells are filthy. Not metaphorically, not emotionally. I mean actually, horrifyingly, viscerally gross. Every second of your life, each of your 30 trillion-ish cells is generating biological junk, misfolded proteins, oxidized fats, busted organelles, stray DNA fragments, viral hitchhikers, rogue metabolic byproducts, and the cytoplasmic equivalent of forgotten Tupperware, with fuzzy green leftovers you can't even identify anymore. Now, your body isn't entirely negligent. It has a system for this. It's called autophagy, Greek for self-eating, because the ancient Greeks were metal as hell and didn't mess around with euphemisms. Autophagy is the cellular process by which old, damaged or unnecessary components are broken down and recycled for parts. It's like spring cleaning, except your spring cleaning involves digesting your own internal structures before they ferment into a molecular crime scene. And when autophagy works, it's beautiful, poetic even. Cells detect internal damage, wrap it in a double membrane called an autophagosome, fuse it with a lysosome full of acid and enzymes, and dissolve the problem like a corpse in a vat of hydrofluoric acid. Then the useful bits get recycled into new proteins, new lipids, new fuel for life. Autophagy keeps us young, lean, sharp, cancer-free, and inflammation light. It's the ultimate do-it-yourself cellular maintenance plan. But, and this should surprise exactly no one, autophagy declines with age. Like everything else. The cleanup crew gets sluggish, the recycling bins overflow, the enzymes get leaky, the detection systems go fuzzy, and suddenly your neurons are swimming in a swamp of aggregated proteins. Your liver is clogged with lipofuscin, a ghastly brown gunk so persistent it's nicknamed the aging pigment. Your muscles start accumulating dysfunctional mitochondria. Your joints begin to hoard inflammatory cytokines, like a nervous dragon with a hoarding complex. It's as if your body's internal janitors went on strike decades ago, and nobody noticed because we were too busy trying to get abs and drink more water. So what if you could bring in new janitors? What if you hired an elite team of molecular sanitation workers? What if, bear with me, you replaced autophagy with nanite-assisted autophagy? Welcome to the future of cellular cleanliness, where the trash takes itself out. Picture this. A nanite gliding through your cytoplasm like a microscopic Roomba, except instead of sucking up cereal crumbs, it's identifying misfolded proteins, tagging them, engulfing them, and dissolving them in a nanoreactor chamber optimized for energy efficiency. Think of it as a mobile biochemical blender. Smoothie ingredients, tau tangles, oxidized cholesterol, broken ribosomes. Even better? These nanites wouldn't just randomly clean, they'd prioritize. Using biosensors, chemical markers, and real-time communication with your cell's status reports, they'd triage problems. Misfolded prion? High priority? Damaged mitochondria and leaking free radicals? Send in the demolition crew. Unused viral protein synthesis scaffold? Scrap for parts. Your cell becomes not a swamp but a curated gallery of optimal function. Every component pristine, every organelle vetted, every molecule reviewed and audited like it's applying for a high-security government job. And unlike our current autophagy system, which relies on aging, occasionally glitchy enzymes, nanites don't forget. They don't get distracted. They don't decide to skip brain cleanup today because you didn't sleep enough. They follow code, they follow orders, they do the work. Let's talk about the worst offenders, the freeloaders, the rot, lipofuscin. You know when you're scraping gunk out of an old drain and you think, how did this exist inside a house for 10 years without someone setting it on fire? That's lipofuscin, but for your cells. It's the accumulated remains of things your lysosomes couldn't quite digest. They tried. They really did. But some molecules just laugh in the face of acid, and so the bits pile up. Polymers of oxidized fat and protein, cross-linked beyond redemption, permanently pigmented, biologically useless, and very much in the way. You know where you find the most lipofuscin? Brains, eyes, hearts, anywhere you can't afford to have a little junk lying around, which is hilarious and terrifying. Nanites don't care that lipofuscin is indigestible. Nanites are engineers. Give them a problem and enough time and they'll figure out how to deconstruct it, molecule by molecule, break the bonds, isolate the components, dissociate the carbon chains, reduce it to fuel, to harmless byproducts, or export it via microchannels to the lymphatic system for excretion. You'll literally pee out your brain trash. What a miracle. Let's return to those mitochondria. Aging cells don't just get more dysfunctional ones, they also keep them. You're supposed to remove mitochondria that stop producing energy efficiently. This is called mitophagy, and it's crucial. Because old mitochondria don't just slow down, they leak electrons, generate reactive oxygen species, and trigger inflammatory cascades. Imagine power plants that belch out smog, run at half capacity, and sometimes explode for no reason. That's your body after age 60. Nanites can fix this in two ways. One, identify and dissolve those bad mitochondria, replacing them with healthy ones, either biologically repaired or entirely artificial. Two, monitor mitochondrial health in real time, restoring optimal protein folding, stabilizing membranes, clearing out calcium overloads, and ensuring that these tiny engines hum quietly and efficiently. It's like turning every mitochondrion into a Tesla Powerwall, instead of a Soviet-era generator held together with duct tape and resentment. Then there's the brain. Ah, sweet cerebral cortex, the most delicate, complex, and tragically vulnerable organ in the body. Autophagy is absolutely essential in neurons because they don't divide. Once a neuron is damaged, there's no do-over. And yet, aging brings inflammation, protein tangles, misfolded amyloids, and synaptic clutter. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington's, all of them stem from failed cleanup. Now imagine nanites that specialize in neurocleaning. They cross the blood-brain barrier. They recognize aggregates of amyloid beta or tau proteins not just by shape, but by sequence. They dismantle them, not just remove the plaques, but prevent their formation. They also monitor neurotransmitter levels and ensure that receptors are working properly. If a neuron is struggling, nanites gently ferry in support molecules, energy substrates, and even encourage neurite regrowth. Your thoughts are no longer filtered through sludge. The mind is clear, memory sharpens, depression lifts, processing speed returns. Your brain is no longer decaying. It is, dare we say, pristine. Let's go smaller. What if nanites also began to optimize the cellular environment, not just cleaning it, but restructuring it, replacing inefficient Golgi apparatus segments, streamlining ER stress responses, modifying cytoskeletal elements for faster intracellular traffic? What if these nanites not only cleaned, but repurposed what they cleaned. Turn waste into ATP. Turn damaged lipids into repair scaffolds. Make your own decline your fuel. This is circular economy biology. This is regenerative maintenance. This is your body as an efficient, self-regulating machine that never slows down. Not because it's immortal, but because entropy is constantly being reversed in real time. What we're really describing here isn't just better health, it's continuous health. A real-time nanite-mediated feedback loop of detection, diagnosis, disassembly, and rebuilding. Right now, health is binary. You're sick or you're well. Your cell is functional or it's not. You go to the doctor when something breaks, and usually it's already too late. In the nanite-cleaned future, there is no too late. There is no early detection. There is only constant vigilance, constant curation. You don't get sick. You get notifications. You don't recover. You just return to baseline. And your baseline isn't average for your age. It's optimal for your species. And now the twist. Because every utopia comes with its dark corner. What if the nanites clean too well? What if they begin removing things we were meant to keep? What if they interpret grief, anxiety, or trauma as errors to be scrubbed? What if in pursuit of purity, we lose the friction that makes us real? Will we mourn our scars, the cellular ghosts of people we once were? Will we crave the poetry of decay, the beauty and fading? Will we miss the fog, the fatigue, the reminder that we are human? Because if your body is always clean, always perfect, always whole, what happens to the parts of life that came from mess, from chaos, from entropy, from the cluttered, clumsy, precious experience of aging? But for now, we're not gods, not yet. We're janitors with dreams, programmers of our own meat, architects of the anti-decay, and the future may be shiny and stainless, but we'll always remember the trash heap we came from. The miracle isn't that nanites can fix us. The miracle is that they know what to fix. Because when you think about it, really, actually think about it, it's absolutely deranged that anything can operate inside a human cell and make decisions. We're talking about a dense, chaotic, squishy stew of proteins, ions, sugars, enzymes, lipids, hormones, neurotransmitters, and gossip molecules, all swirling through microtubules and membranes like a rave where every single dancer is high on biochemistry. And somewhere inside that, a nanite just a few hundred atoms wide must float into this maelstrom, observe the chaos and ask itself, so, what's out of place? It has no eyes, no emotions, no memory of being a child, just sensors, subroutines, and a mandate written in material science and the quiet digital certainty of purpose. The first key to understanding how nanites will know what to fix lies in accepting that they aren't trying to emulate life. They're trying to emulate maintenance. They are not your doctor. They are your plumber, your electrician, your termite inspector. Their job is not to understand the poetry of biology. Their job is to say, this protein is misfolded, this voltage is off, this lipid is oxidized, this membrane is too porous, fix it. They are guided not by empathy, but by data, rich biochemical data, parsed and interpreted in microseconds. To make that happen, every nanite will likely be equipped with a suite of biosensors, chemical noses, molecular tactile systems, femtoscopic scanning arrays. These sensors wouldn't just recognize one or two molecular structures, they'd recognize patterns, gradients of calcium ion concentration, shifts in pH, electrochemical anomalies, unusual protein conformations, rising inflammatory markers. A single nanite might scan the entire local area for molecular signatures and compare them against an onboard dictionary of ideal biological states. If something deviates from the blueprint, it flags it. This isn't unlike the way a modern cybersecurity program scans for malware, not by knowing every possible virus, but by knowing what healthy code looks like and flagging deviations. Your body becomes a giant living server, and the nanites are your immune system and IT department all rolled into one. But biosensors alone aren't enough. The real magic comes from context awareness. A broken cell in your liver is different from a broken cell in your brain. A misfolded protein in your gut may be harmless, while the same one in your hippocampus could start a chain reaction of neural deterioration. So nanites need to know where they are, what they're looking at, and how urgent the situation is. This is where AI-driven pattern recognition enters the story. Inside each nanite, perhaps even distributed across a swarm of cooperating nanites, are models trained on billions of cellular scenarios. These are not traditional AI models, the kind that need cloud access and electricity and long training cycles. These would be compressed, neuromorphic architectures, tiny onboard learning systems built into quantum dot processors or carbon nanotube logic arrays, capable of making real-time decisions using millivolt scale power. They are, in essence, the first generation of thinking particles. These nanites don't just see a broken mitochondrion and destroy it, they run a calculation. Is this mitochondrion salvageable? Is it a unique failure or part of a larger pattern? If I remove it, will the cell die? If I don't, will it become a source of oxidative stress? These decisions are made in milliseconds, guided by probability, logic, and mission parameters. The nanite doesn't panic, it doesn't second guess, it acts, and it logs that action. Everything it sees, everything it does, is recorded. Now multiply that by billions of nanites in every corner of your body, all communicating. Welcome to the body-wide consensus mesh, a wireless, possibly quantum-secure network of nanites constantly voting on what constitutes a problem. They share data, they triangulate abnormalities, they run distributed checks. If one nanite sees a strange protein structure, it asks others nearby, "Do you see this too?" If 47 out of 50 confirm, they act. If only one detects it, they wait, monitor, learn. False positives are filtered. Mistakes are minimized. This isn't brute force medicine. This is a symphony of surveillance and adaptation. The Cathedral of Dustless Things stands as both monument and question, a reminder that in our quest to escape death, we may also escape meaning, that in curing the ache, we may also numb the longing, and that longing, perhaps more than anything, is what makes us human. And maybe, one day, the nanites themselves will go, not because we dismantle them, but because we no longer need them, because we will have remembered, because we will have chosen. Let's look back, slowly now, as if rewinding a dream. We began, not with death, but with its shadow, the quiet, creeping rot we've come to call aging, not a single enemy, but a collection of failures, stacked and layered and softened into something we pretend to accept. Telomeres fray, mitochondria burn out, DNA becomes a palimpsest of its younger self, proteins misfold, pile up, and poison the places we need most, our brains, our hearts, our memory of who we were. Cells turn to clutter. Time is written not in years, but in damage. And we wondered, what if we could fix that? Not with kale, not with lotions, but with machines, microscopic ones. Not machines as we know them, no wheels, no blinking lights, but machines as nature builds them, small, elegant, quiet. Nanites. Born of science, raised by engineering, sculpted in the clean rooms of our ambition. Devices small enough to enter a cell without knocking. Smart enough to know what's broken. Gentle enough to fix it without setting off alarms. We imagined them threading through our veins like caretakers from a forgotten age, brushing away molecular rust, restoring lost sequences like librarians returning books to ancient shelves. Some nanites repair the genome, others track down rogue cells, others erase waste, rescue organelles, rebuild what has collapsed. They can sense, they can analyze, they can choose, they can, if we let them, heal. We explored how they might become our new immune system, not based on rage and overreaction, but on logic and precision. We imagined a world where infection is not feared, because our blood already holds the tools to dismantle any invader, to remember it, to share that memory across our whole internal network. Disease becomes a passing curiosity. Cancers are spotted before they start. The flu becomes a myth. And then we took a deeper breath and wondered, what else might they clean? Because biology at its core is a mess. It's stunning, it's poetic, but it's inefficient. Our cells accumulate garbage, oxidized lipids, misfolded proteins, busted machinery. Our current system, autophagy, is noble but flawed. It slows with age, it guesses, it fails. But nanites don't guess. They identify, they act. They dissolve the debris with surgical cruelty, turning decay into fuel. They don't just maintain, they curate. They transform your body into a gallery of function. And even beyond cleanup, they become artists of restoration. They trace old scars in your genome and restore them, pixel by pixel. They prune telomeres like bonsai trees, neither too long nor too short. They speak in electricity. They hum in chemical gradients. They whisper to your cells in a language made of sensors and code and carbon fiber. But then the questions came, the real ones. If we erase every error, what happens to the parts of ourselves that were built from them? If we never get sick, never slow down, never forget, what happens to the fragile rituals of care? What happens to storytelling, to legacy, to the quiet ways we once said goodbye? We realized, perhaps too late, that to remove death is also to change the shape of life. And so we turned the microscope inward, not just on our cells, but on ourselves. Because this isn't just a story of machines. It's a story of what happens when the very thing we thought we needed to fight, aging, becomes optional. What happens when maintenance becomes eternal? When youth is no longer a memory, but a permanent state? What are we when we are no longer broken things? We dreamed of cathedrals built to remember decay. We imagined people walking into them just to remember what it feels like to ache. We painted pictures of a society that no longer needs death, and so invents rituals to feel close to it again. And we saw too the risk of forgetting, of becoming too smooth, too curated, too safe. Because when everything works, when nothing fades, when memory is just data, then longing becomes obsolete. And longing, we realized, is where beauty lives. But maybe that's not the end. Maybe that's the beginning. Because even in this world of perfect maintenance, of internal nanite symphonies, we still get to choose. We can choose to keep the tremble in our voice. We can choose to leave some things broken. We can choose to remember pain, even if we no longer need to feel it. maybe the highest form of wisdom is not to be indestructible, but to be delicately repaired, like a pot mended with gold. Not because we had to be, because we wanted to be, because scars remind us where we've been, because the cracks let in light. So maybe the dream is not immortality, maybe it's not eternal youth, maybe it's something simpler, a chance to live long enough, clearly enough, to understand what we truly care about, to see our bodies not as prisons but as gardens, to tend to them, to thank them, to rebuild them where we must, and to let them crumble where we must too. Because nanites will not save us from being human. They will only make us more ourselves if we are brave enough to guide them gently. And so we leave this strange journey here, at the edge of the imaginable. We have wandered through bloodstreams, whispered to chromosomes, mourned the death of dying, and touched the quiet wonder of a future where no cell is ever alone. We have asked what we might gain, we have glimpsed what we might lose, and now the question is no longer can we cure aging, it is, should we? And if so, how gently can we hold the answer? If you've made it this far, first of all, congratulations. You're either extremely curious, extremely tired, or both. Honestly, I'm impressed. Most people would have dozed off somewhere between telomere restoration and sentient mitochondria. But if your eyes are still open, or if you're listening to this half asleep, wrapped in a blanket of existential wonder, take a second to like and subscribe. It really helps more night owls like you find this strange little corner of the internet. And hey, if you hit the bell, you'll know exactly when the next long-winded, low-lit science ramble arrives to tuck you in. And if you're thinking, wait, how am I still awake? Don't worry, that's normal. You've just spent over an hour contemplating the molecular reprogramming of death itself. That tends to short-circuit the part of the brain responsible for sleep. But now, your cells are safe, your thoughts are humming, and the nanites, real or imagined, are quietly sweeping the floor of your subconscious. So close your eyes, let the questions linger, and rest easy. Good night. This has been the Midnight Inquiry.